Hello, welcome to the Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Chapter 2, the demographic structure of the Indian society. And our topic is literacy. Literacy as a prerequisite to education is an instrument of empowerment. The more literate the population, the greater the consciousness of career options, as well as participation in the knowledge economy. Further, literacy can lead to a health awareness and fuller participation in the cultural and economic well-being of the community. Literacy levels have improved considerably after independence, and most two-thirds of our population is now literate. But improvements in the literacy rate have to struggle to keep up with the rate of growth of Indian population, which is still quite high. Enormous efforts is needed to ensure the literacy of new generations, which are only just beginning to be smaller in numbers than in the past. Literacy varies considerably across gender, across region, and across social groups. The literacy rate for women is almost 22% less than the literacy rate for men. However, female literacy has been rising faster than male literacy, partly because it started from relatively low levels. Thus, female literacy rose by almost 15% between 1991 and 2001 compared to the rise in male literacy of a little less than 12% in the same period. Literacy rates also vary by social groups. Historically disadvantaged communities like the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes have lower rates of literacy, and the rates of female literacy within these groups are even lower. Regional variations are still very wide, with states like Kerala approaching universal literacy, while states like Bihar are lagging far behind. The inequalities in the literacy rate are especially important because they tend to reproduce inequality across generations. Illiterate parents are at a severe disadvantage in ensuring that their children are well educated, thus perpetuating existing inequalities. The next point is rural-urban differences. The vast majority of population of India has always lived in rural areas, and that continues to be true. The 2001 census found that the 72% of our population still lives in villages, while 28% is living in the cities and towns. However, the urban population has been increasing its share steadily, from about 11% at the beginning of the 20th century to about 28% at the beginning of the 21st century, an increase of about 2.5 times. It is not a question of numbers alone. Processes of modern development ensure that the economic and social significance of the agrarian rural way of life declines relative to the significance of the industrial urban way of life. This has been broadly true all over the world, and it is true in India as well. Agriculture used to be by far the largest contributor to the country's total economic production, but today only it only contributes about one-fourth of the gross domestic product, while the majority of our population live in rural areas and make their living out of agriculture. The relative economic value of what they produce has fallen drastically. Moreover, more and more people who live in villages may no longer work in agriculture or even in the village. Rural people are increasingly engaged in non farm rural occupation like transport service, business enterprises, or craft manufacturing. If they are close enough, then they may travel daily to the nearest urban center to work while continuing to live in the village. Mass media and communication channels are now bringing images of urban lifestyles and patterns of consumption into the rural areas. Consequently, urban norms and standards are becoming well known even in the remote villages, creating new desires and aspirations for consumption. Mass transit and mass communication are bridging the gap between the rural and urban areas. Even in the past, the rural areas were never really beyond the reach of market forces, and today they are being more closely integrated into the consumer market. Considered from an urban point of view, the rapid growth in urbanization shows that the town or city has been acting as a magnet for the rural population. Those who cannot find work in the rural areas go to the city in search of it work. This flow of rural to urban migration has also been accelerated by the continuous decline of common property resources like ponds, forests, and grazing lands. These common resources enabled poor people to survive in the villages, although they owned little or no land. Now, these resources have been turned into private property or they are exhausted. Pond may run dry or no longer provide enough fish, forests may have been cut down and have vanished. If people no longer have access to these resources, but on the other hand have to buy many things in the market that they used to get free, like fuel, fodder, and supplementary food items, then their hardship increases. This hardship is worsened by the fact that opportunities for earning cash income are limited in the villages. Sometimes the village may also be preferred for social reasons, especially the relative anonymity it offers. The fact that the urban life involves interaction with strangers can be an advantage for different reasons. For the socially oppressed groups like scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, this may offer some partial protection from the daily humiliation they may suffer in the village where everyone knows their caste identity. The enormity of the city also allows the poorer sections of the socially dominant rural groups to engage in low status work that they would not be able to do in the village. All these reasons make the city an attractive destination for villagers. The swelling cities bear testimony to this flow of population. This is evident from the rapid rate of urbanization in the post independence period. While urbanization has been occurring at a rapid pace, it is the biggest cities, the metropolis, that have been growing the fastest. These metros attract migrants from the rural areas as well as from the small towns. There are now 5,161 towns and cities in India where 286 million people live. What is striking, however, is that more than two-thirds of the urban population lives in 27 big cities with million plus populations. Clearly, the largest cities in India are growing at such a rapid rate that the urban infrastructure can hardly keep pace. With the mass media's primary focus on these cities, the public face of India is becoming more and more urban, rather than ruler. Yet, in terms of the political power dynamics in the country, the rural areas remain a decisive force. Now, let us wind up the session and thank you very much for engaging yourself with the Self Learning Podcast.